morning, and welcome to the Data Science Connect virtual conference. We're all learning to be flexible in these interesting times, so thank you for sharing a few minutes. The purpose of this morning is to talk about some interesting use cases in analytics, to talk about how companies are adjusting and being smarter and more agile to understand their customers, their supply chains, their environment, and how AWS is helping solve that. I chose the theme of experiment boldly. These companies have tried new things, tried new patterns, and when the cost of failure is relatively low, the amount of experimenting goes up. So at the end, we're all in this time. You see the little cartoon on the right about how to shrink. We talk about big data, but actually big data is not that interesting. It's consolidating into a small pattern, something we can digest to make it great data. So these are I'm going to talk about some trends, some customer examples, and go briefly into some of the enabling AWS technologies. And then, as you may know, there are subsequent workshops today to dive more deeply into each of them. We do have some poll questions that are planned, and I will be monitoring the chat as we go along as best as possible. So, advance. So here's an interesting study that I found. So Forbes reported, and we've heard the data is the new oil, which drives me nuts. I don't want to be oil. I want to be solar, and I want to be wind. I want to be renewable. Some of you know Amazon is committed to climate control, climate change. But that aside, this Forbes study said by making 10% more data accessible, a typical Fortune 1000 company has a $65 million increase in net income. So a little bit goes a long way. 65 million of net income, not revenue, but bottom line profit to the company. So how do we as groups, how do we as leaders in our companies enable that 10%? How do we enable that change and that incremental discoveries that are trapped otherwise? Another interesting set of metrics I've seen is that AI/ML specifically is growing. It's coming out of the labs and coming out of quants and coming out of the back part of the office into more mainstream decision making. So IDC suspects there'll be about $50 billion of spend on cognitive technologies in 2021, which is just next year, obviously. I like this next metric that says 75% enterprises are going from piloting to operationalizing, which is a really long word, and I wonder if it's even in the formal dictionary now, operationalizing. But how do I take these decisions? How do we take these deep learning models? How do we take these regression models and apply them more and more and more and more? How do we have them make automated decisions that otherwise a human would be doing? Finally, the 57% of organizations said that they would transform their organization via AI in the next 3 years. So it is having a pretty profound impact on how our businesses are operating. The final thing I'll bring up as an interesting trend is that a voice of customer sentiment, LTV, churn models, all these other terms, net promoter scores, all these other ways we're trying to understand customer sentiment and the customer's loyalty to us and our brand and our products and how well we're satisfying them. These models have existed for years and years and years, and it was based on purchase behavior or calls to the call center, structured data. Well, I found this fascinating metric from Gartner recently that said, you know what, 93% of that customer conversation is unstructured. Because guess what? Now we have chatbot transcripts. Now we have the actual audio. We are recording this session for training purposes. Guess what? That's recorded as well. We have videos. If the days we can go back to stores, we actually have security camera videos that can be analyzed to understand actual browsing behaviors. We have all kind of emails, all these other things. So how do we enable our companies to analyze 100% of the data, not just the 7% that neatly fits in databases? We've been doing that for years, and there's still some challenges with it, but how do we enable 100% of the data? And then how do we enable the tools to go analyze it? How do we actually listen to the audio, listen to the actual voice, and detect sentiment? And you'll actually hear some of that tomorrow as well in our keynote with Rally Point, on how they're actually listening to their customers, which are our military veterans. So that is, as a backdrop, those are three important trends that we're seeing, or sets of metrics that I think are shaping how we need to think about analytics in our companies. So the first use case I'll bring up is Moderna, and hopefully everyone knows or has heard of Moderna. They are, of all the companies in the race to find a COVID-19 vaccine, it depends on how you want to measure, of course, they may be leading the race. They won the $1.5 billion, I shouldn't say won again in this COVID-19 world, but they earned the $1.5 billion Operation Warp Speed contract from the government to pre-make the vaccine. And they have been working on this mRNA sequencing. They inherently have to be agile. They realize that to fight this brand or this type of viruses, that they had to be more agile in their processes, and they had to experiment faster, and they had to be able to try new sequences. You can see that this drug design studio where they're optimizing the mRNA sequences. So they had to be very agile to change, to be able to adopt and find the vaccine fast. And the result is, some of you may know, in just 42 days, they delivered their first batch of vaccine 42 days after the COVID-19 genome was isolated. 42 days, which compares traditionally to over 10 years. Historically, it takes 10 years to go find a vaccine. Now, Moderna had been working on it for a while. I mean, they've been working on mRNA in general, but their ability to be agile in this environment, and this is, at least to me, the most pressing need we have around. And they've been able to do this as they leverage AWS. They leverage AWS Analytics tools for their clinical research trials, amongst other things. So it's a really interesting case. This was a press release about 4 weeks ago. And obviously we hope them well, and we're all praying that they and others can find a vaccine as quickly as possible. Next example I'll bring up is Invista. Invista is a manufacturing group within Koch Industries. Some of you, at least here in Atlanta, know Koch Industries in Georgia Pacific downtown. But Invista is a large global manufacturer. They have been, of many things that they're doing within their manufacturing business, is they're consolidating all their ERP data across their various SAP instances. So all their various orders, purchase orders, GL, all that other bit. And at the core, the challenge they were trying to solve was unscheduled plant downtime. You know, there's many challenges that manufacturers face around forecasting, inventory, downtime, employees, personnel. Here's an interesting use case these days of social distancing within a manufacturing context. How do we actually measure that, which is another interesting computer vision, deep learning problem that is being solved. But this specific case that they were talking about was how they want to reduce unscheduled plant downtime. And you can see they have a fully automated stocking process to move spare parts. That is a pretty big deal for a manufacturing facility. You can think of all the machinery. And so they have this is where they've taken AI and put it in their operations. They are automatically ordering and moving parts around to ensure they have the right part at the right place at the right time. They said they're achieving about $300 million of value, and not just from this use case, but from many of them. But $300 million is obviously a very material impact and benefit to the company. Amelia, I'm looking for questions on the side, and if they pop up, I'll jump in. Next one, John Deere. John Deere is trying to feed a hungry world. John Deere is a large agricultural company that manufactures tractors and combines and other manufacturing implements. The interesting, as I even looked at this picture, so my grandfather was a farmer, and I guarantee he never planted corn like this. You can see the pattern where you have it's like the V and the intersection. I mean, I rode in that combine with him a couple times. I rode with the planter a couple times. He was never able to do this. Well, guess what? These modern tools, these modern tractors and planters are very precise. They have a whole line called Exact Emerge. And they're also trying to maximize the yield, which means they have to put the right seed in the right place at the right depth with the right spacing and the right time. And they have to do it once. They don't have a chance next week to come fix it. They got to get the planting right once. So their equipment is all smart. Their equipment is bristles with IoT sensors to measure all the down pressure and the angles and all these other things. And they aggregate it across the world to make better decisions for farmers. And the metrics are stunning. So in 1 minute, and this presentation was a year ago, in 1 minute, they have 5,000 active machines, 700 measurements, 12 million measurements per second, which is just stunning. And at the end of many benefits they have, and this was a Forbes article they did, two things that popped out of this article from John Deere that just amazed me was they want to manage every plant. So think about this scale. They want to have a one-to-one relationship with every plant in every field. Think about the analytics around that. Think about the scale. Think about how I need to track that and have a personalized relationship with every plant. That is just a mind-blowing statistic. The second thing is on the far right is how on the herbicide sprayers, they now have cameras and they have computer vision. So they use deep learning, AIML, computer vision on the herbicide sprayers to differentiate from weed from plant so that they only spray weeds. Historically, you'd spray herbicide across the whole field. You know what? It gets on some corn. Oh, well, let's just hope the consumer washes it. But 90% was basically wasted. They've been able to reduce herbicide 90%, which is a cost benefit, which is a health benefit. And we're also not dumping 90% of herbicide that's not needed. So that is how AIML is making a direct impact in our world about feeding our hungry world. A couple use cases about how Amazon ourselves works at this. As you might know, our scale is pretty immense and it's been very an important aspect of part of the COVID-19. Lots of packages. Alexa is obviously very much AIML, the core of a lot of this. We now have driverless drones. We have air deliveries, and some may have seen there are now these blue little gizmos. There's these blue drones, driverless drones that are delivering packages in select cities, like Atlanta. So Amelia, if you see one coming down your street, that's what it is. Those are driverless. So that's how machine learning is applying at scale. And our fulfillment centers, we use lots of these capabilities within our fulfillment centers. Time series for labor and process telemetry, searching customer shipment history with searches, computer vision for visual bin inspection. We're not doing hard counts of inventory. We're using computer vision to do that at scale. So lots of AIML is directly responsible for getting you the right package at the right time, especially in this unprecedented scale of COVID-19. NFL, some of you may have seen this. You've seen the game where the pass goes and you see that stat that said, wow, that was only a 16.2% probability of completion or speed running down to someone running down the field. Those are all real-time calculations done. There's RFID tags put on the players and in the ball. And these things are processed in real time during the game, as you might see. They give a great insight to some real metrics around what's happening on the field that makes the game much more interactive and engaging. We've also then taken a lot of those stats and we publish them out to the teams themselves as they do their Moneyball, sabermetric type of analysis, as you may have seen. The interesting thing about this use case is that at the moment, the consumers of these statistics are the 32 NFL teams, but there is interest in letting these metrics go out to the 60 million fantasy football players. So think about that scale. 60 million people researching their fantasy picks by looking at analytics. Think about that scale. Moving on, I know we got about 13 minutes left. Another interesting use case here. Many on this call are used to big data and Spark processing, some of those types of analytics and use cases. Salesforce has their their data management platform, where they do customer matching amongst other use cases. They have about 40 petabytes of data that grows 4% week over week, which 4% of 40 petabytes is a big number. And so they do their Spark processing, do customer matching. The thing I find very interesting about this use case and kind of an interesting about cloud is that, yes, they have 3,000 clusters that they start up and then they shut off. And they run this a couple hours a day. And they start them up and shut them down. And think about that. Why 3,000? Because they can. Because you could run 3,000 for an hour, or you could run 300 for 10 hours, or you could run 30 for 1,000 hours. It's all a scalable thing in the cloud. And so they run 3,000 because they can. And it runs and then shut it down. So you think about that performance and that cost benefit for doing it at a business growing like Salesforce. This use case, many of us have probably been in this case, and I call this the engine light issue. So we've all been driving, and my daughter about 6 months ago was driving home from school in Alabama, and her check engine light goes on. And she calls me, Dad, the check engine light's on. What should I do? Keep driving, but if it catches fire, stop. I didn't really have much better insight of what the check engine light meant. She came home safely, thankfully. She got to the dealer. They said there was some problem with something and started fixing it. Well, imagine if proactively Ford would have been looking at those diagnostics in the engine, proactively looking at them, proactively realizing what the problem was, proactively texted her and me and said, hey, you can make it home safely, but get over to the dealer as soon as possible. And that's what Autodesk is doing. Autodesk is a CAD CAM software company. And rather, they wanted to increase their customer experience. And by doing that, they are proactively looking at the logs and proactively searching for errors and problems that could prevent a larger issue. So they're streaming the logs real time, they're analyzing the logs real time, and proactively coming back to their customers with recommendations and fixes so it doesn't disrupt their business, doesn't disrupt their life. Pretty important customer care, customer experience improvement. Finally, Intuit. I like this one. My wife is a CPA, and she would talk about the shoebox people, the people that come April 15th would show up with a shoebox of receipts, dump them on the table and say, here, go do my tax services tax return company. Firstly, the fascinating thing about Intuit is that 95% of their compute, 95% of their compute is used within about a 5-week window of the year, within the April 15th, April 1st to May. So otherwise, 95% of their compute sits idle. But they're deliberately using AI/ML to improve the tax process. So not only scanning in the images, but then making sense of what's a deductible expense versus not deductible expense. There's an AI/ML model, a SageMaker model, to give a recommendation. Should you go with the standard or itemized deductions? They use SageMaker to comb through the 80,000 pages of tax code to make recommendations and make the filing faster so that you get your return faster. So Intuit is deliberately using AI/ML to get you money back faster, which I think you like that shoebox people. Yeah, write that one down, Amelia. It's a good one. When she told it to me, yeah, I get it. I get it. And so this is how AI/ML is directly helping shoebox people, amongst others. So now I want to briefly go over some of the enabling capabilities underneath it. So what companies are losing and we're using and where companies are going is to this more flexible, open analytics architecture. Data lakes, you may hear it's called. There's lots of terms for it, but basically a place to put all your data that's cheap, scalable, global, available, a lot of other important characteristics, but open as well. Any format, if it's an email, if it's a PDF, it's an open file format like Parquet, some of you may have heard of ORC, or any of these other things that may come in. We want to be able to store that and enable our end users to find some insight and experiment boldly like they weren't able to before. And there's 3 big buckets between data warehousing, analytics, and machine learning. And the goal is to enable experiment quickly. Any type of analytics, from data warehouse to predictive. So within that, I'm going to break down the AWS Analytics Portfolio briefly, and then the AWS AI/ML Portfolio. So the Analytics Portfolio, AWS provides a large palette of tools. You should think of these tools as, I call them dotted line cloud things. They're not the hard boxes that we're used to thinking of. They're not, you have to go buy a server and buy software and install software and configure it and do all these other things. And oh, by the way, if I have to go buy software and hardware, I probably have to make a capital purchase, which means I have to build a business case, which means I have to figure out an ROI. These in this cloud world, these are plug and play components with fuzzy edges. You can click a button and start something. If you don't like it, you turn it off. Some of these things are serverless, meaning you just go run it, and when you're not using it, it shuts out, doesn't cost you a thing. Just cost disappears. So there's some really fascinating capabilities in the cloud. So we have dashboarding, some predictive analytics at the top, and then we have other components in the middle, and I'll go over them now. So going top to bottom, and I'm not going to cover all of these on this content. So QuickSight is our visualization tool. So this is a way to roll out dashboards, graphs, charts. Auto narratives, one of my favorite things is that we are now using AI/ML So how many of us have ever put a chart in a presentation, showed it to your boss, and the boss looks at the chart like they've never seen it, and you say, well, don't you see it's right there? And the boss can't interpret the chart. They're like, am I looking at this backwards? We are now generating auto narratives. We're using AML to tell you what the trend is, to tell you, hey, revenue is up 3.2% because the Cleveland market grew 6.8% because these 3 customers grew more. We are giving those specific insights and recommendations as driven by AML. We'll come back to SageMaker in a moment. If I go down the next step to analytics, Redshift is our cloud data warehouse, extremely cost affordable, scalable, easy to use. I helped the customer in 20 minutes. We went from 0 to query in 20 minutes. I watched them. They clicked some buttons, created a Redshift instance, clicked some buttons, loaded some data from Oracle, clicked some other buttons, were able to query it 20 minutes. And that system for 20 minutes, if they chose, rounded up to an hour, if they chose not to keep it after that hour would cost them $5.34. So this is the scale of things in the cloud, how you can experiment boldly. And if they didn't like it after that hour, I would have given them the $5.34 myself. I'd have just taken it out of my pocket and given it to them. EMR is our Spark, our Spark and Hadoop framework. So it can run, I think, 26 of the Apache projects. We've added a lot of others recently. We innovate and leverage open source very, very extensively. A fascinating capability about EMR is we've separated storage and compute. So this is back to the Salesforce example. If the storage, the data stays on S3 persistently, I don't need the cluster running all the time. So I can just shut it down. I can turn a cluster on, do some analytics, shut it down, and move on my way. AWS Glue is serverless Spark as well. Another capability. Serverless is neat. You don't have to do anything. It just runs. Athena, serverless SQL. Elasticsearch. Elasticsearch, some of you may know, is an open source project to around text search of logs, keyword matches, things of that nature. We've just made it easier. Customers came and said, we like Elasticsearch. Can you just manage it for us? And that's what we did. Kinesis, and then off of Kafka in the bottom. These are our streaming infrastructures. This is how to know about what's going on in your world now. So if I want to stream data now, those are the tools for it. And then at the bottom of it is our data lake infrastructure. S3, as you may know, is our simple storage service. We have 6 different tiers of storage within it, going from anywhere from $24 a terabyte a month down to, I think, 0.23 cents. So we have some great capabilities in data management and cost effectiveness, so you can store all your data forever. The AML portfolio, we have a very broad portfolio around the way, and it ranges from some package services like recognition that can do computer vision, Lex, which is the guts of Alexa, as you might imagine. We have some packaged applications around, say, Amazon Forecast that can be used to forecast inventory, revenue, personalize, fraud detection. So we certainly have some packaged apps. Then we have ML services, which SageMaker is a large component of. I'll talk about that more in just a moment. I know we got 4 minutes left. And then underneath it all, if you as data scientists, if you want to code yourself, if you data scientists want to go out and write TensorFlow, or you want to work on some of these new capabilities directly, you can. So we're giving you several options to experiment boldly, to figure out what set of tools you want to use at what scale. If you want to go run 100 GPUs or 1,000 GPUs, you click a button and you have them. So drill for just a moment more, and I know we're just about on time. So SageMaker, this is managed Jupyter Notebooks. I think many people on this call are probably familiar with Jupyter Notebooks. It's generally an open source platform, an open source GUI for generating AML code language, if you will. And so customers have said, we'd like you to manage these for us, and we want you to make it serverless, and we like to just scale up and be on our way. So we've built these. I think we're now on 2 years they've been out. And we've done a lot of innovation along the way, cost-effective, secure, DevOps ready. You know, how do I get a model from development into production quickly, and how do I test for decay? How do I constantly retest? How do we champion challengers? Some of us know that certain types of models perform better than others. And so we've done a lot of innovation in this space. You can see some of the innovations in model monitor for model drift, inference, reinforcement learning. We've been working a lot on that as well. So a lot of capabilities within SageMaker as well. And I encourage those on the call to experiment and try. So we have, I think We got 2 minutes left. So great, right? Immediately following this, so John Wyatt on my team has 3 more detailed labs coming up. So he talks more about AWS Analytics for data science. So that starts here at 9:30 in 2 minutes, followed by some forecasting with Amazon Redshift. Some interesting things about using Python as well as SageMaker against Redshift to solve some of these real world problems. Followed by some more detail on both EMR and Amazon SageMaker directly, how we use open source Jupyter notebooks. So I'm just looking with, got 1 or 2 minutes left. Let's see, did we do the poll question, Amelia? Trying to see if we had any questions, observations. I know that was a quick flyby. Well, with that, thank you for your time.
I don't think we had any questions, but now's a good time to remind everyone that in the top right corner of the app, you'll see there's a Q&A section and a chat section and an audience section where you can see who's in there. And we'll be running polls throughout the conference as well, as Patrick mentioned.
And we have John today, and then tomorrow amongst all of the presentations, there's many AWS customers that are presenting over the next 2 days, and we look forward to hearing from them as well.
Can't wait to hear which AWS workshops everyone's going to as well. So thank you.
Well, thank you for the time, and experiment boldly. Thank you.
Thanks, Patrick. Have a great day, everyone.